Okay, so let's start with the report of the superintendent? or-
Terrific. Sure.
okay.
Do you want to do SGO?
Yeah, let's let our SGO.
Sure.
I'm sure they have tests to study for. Everybody in my house is studying.
Hello, guys.
Oh, okay. Okay. So December for SGO in the school is kind of a busy month since it's a little bit shorter because of break and the holidays. So one of the first things that SGO has done this past week is the student Jared Bazan, part of his CAST project for IB, has paired up with SGO to host a fundraiser, and so he basically made cookie jars, and all the money goes to a doctor in South Sudan named Tom Katina. So it's getting kind of the entire school involved, and he's selling each jar for $5, and then the money raised benefits this doctor, who is only doctor to 500,000 kids in South Sudan. So that was kind of cool, and it was an educational opportunity for everyone because a lot of the kids obviously didn't really know about the doctor. So everyone seemed interested, and he sold out all of his cans yesterday, and he made more today, and he only left with one. So that was kind of cool. Another fundraiser that we're doing in SGO that we did for the past couple of years was the candy cane drive, which is where you can buy a candy cane for someone and then it's kind of delivered on Friday. And we got this idea a little bit from Mean Girls. It's like the candy cane when they deliver it. So, and it's not anonymous. You know who gave it to you, but that's really exciting. And everyone always, I think we go through like more than 1,000 candy canes we did last year.
We had to go back and buy a bunch,
more.
So.
So everyone gets excited about that. And another fundraiser we're doing, like you guys know Frankie Conklin. So her family suffers from cystic fibrosis, and we took on last year a Make-A-Wish fundraiser where basically it's letters to Santa. So for every letter you write, depending on the day you deliver it back to the Make-A-Wish Foundation, raises $1 or $2 for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So when Frankie comes home from college, we're going to bring all the letters and we're going to distribute it out to the gym classes next week, so everyone is required to do one basically, and we're going to go with Frankie to deliver them for her foundation.
So also for this holiday season, SGO has adopted a family from Glen Cove, and so we have a family of 4. I think it's 2 boys and 2 girls, and so each grade has been assigned a child. So it's really fun to pick out the gifts. We get a list of everything they want, so we got to be their little Santa. And so this Sunday we're gonna go. So SGO, we collected all the money from our group, and so this Sunday we're gonna go out and we're gonna shop for them. And also this week was the tryouts for Legally Blonde, the musical, which is really exciting because that's like the big musical. So everyone got to try out for that this week, and that was exciting. And also SGO has proposed Festive Friday for the last 2 Fridays of December. So starting tomorrow, everyone will be wearing their ugly sweaters, and yeah, so that's what we have.
Okay,
That's it.
all right, thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays
Same
to you.
guys. All right. Ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So I just want to wish everybody a happy Hanukkah to all of our families who are celebrating the holiday. This is always a really, really busy time of year for everybody, for our families, for our schools, so I thank everybody for coming out tonight. Between holiday concerts and getting ourselves ready for the break, it's one of those times that's both overwhelming and full of a lot of good stuff as well. So we look forward to the break in a couple of weeks. By now, the community should have received the letter from President Labate, whereby the board took action to authorize our attorneys to seek permission to intervene in the action against New York American Water and the Public Service Commission of the State of New York. By doing so, we seek to protect the interests of the district as they relate to the taxation of water in our community. It is really important to note that the monies received from the New York State Senate and the Assembly were received in the form of state aid, and we have no legal authority. In fact, it would be unlawful to use any portion of that money to offset the costs associated with the water bills of specific homeowners or individuals within the community. Not unlike the situation involving the LIPA litigation, and to the extent permissible, we'll continue to keep the community apprised of our efforts in this area. But what we, as a side note to that, what is happening with water in this community is really unconscionable. So we need to be working together to try to get some relief. On Monday, I attended a meeting of the Seacliff Village to introduce myself and to listen in on public comment related to concerns raised regarding Littleworth Lane. Since Election Day, I've met with Mayor Lieberman on 5 separate occasions, and he and I are working towards both short and long-term solutions to address what's going on out there. We plan to form a joint committee of the district and village that will include a wide range of stakeholders so that we can bring this important matter to a satisfactory conclusion. In the meantime, my primary objective is participating in a process that is focused on the safest outcome for our children at all times. I appreciate the frequent and strong collaboration with the mayor, and I'm confident that he and I, with the rest of the community, will be able to work together to achieve that goal. Thirdly, please be on the lookout for climate and needs assessment surveys in the new year related to the development of our next strategic plan. I'll also be seeking volunteers to participate in the development process, so please watch your emails and notices for more information and request to join those efforts. Upon the board's approval of our use of the Bach-Harrison survey tonight, that's on your agenda, we'll schedule the Prevention Needs Assessment Survey, which will be administered to all students in grades 7 through 12. We are in possession of the surveys. We are going to be writing families next week to let them know what's happening, why it's happening, and obviously there's always the ability for a family to opt out of if they choose not to take that, but they need to let us know. In light of the timing and the scheduling, that will we're probably looking more like the first week in January when we get back, and then we'll get the results of that assessment back in about 4 weeks after that. So then we'll be able to really start digging into the planning of what needs to happen both in the school, and then we'll share that information with CASA, and then the results of that survey will also be posted to our website as well, so everybody will have access to those results. I want to thank Don Lang and our social workers for their leadership and organization in putting all that together. It's been they've put a lot of research into looking at the different instruments. Okay. Tonight we welcome Albert Cousins and our high school team. Thank you for coming to share their report on student achievement. And this tonight is the culmination of a 3-part series where we look at all student outcomes, student programming, and future direction setting for our academic program. Albert, I want to thank you for your fine thinking and your strong analysis of this really complex set of data. We have really done a lot of good thinking and talking about what is, and I think that's enabled us to really proceed forward with greater precision. So thank you very much. Over the past 3.5 months that I've been the superintendent, I've met with a lot of people. I set out as a goal to meet with 100 people in 100 days. And I can say with great assurance, I have not counted them, but I've met with well over 100 people. And today, believe it, I counted for whatever reason I decided to count today, but I counted, and today is my 75th workday in the district. So I have until January 29th to hit that 100-day mark, and we still have a lot more folks to talk to. On January 11th, I'll share the results of my entry plan work, and I'll be pleased to report what I've learned and what I think are good next steps. And then later on in this evening, I'll talk about our progress towards, briefly, our progress towards our district goals. And I'm really excited about the work that we've done thus far. And it's nice to see so many of you here because you've been a big part of that. The budget development process is well underway. We have received all of the budget requests from each of our budget developers over the course of several months. That process begins essentially in October. We've compiled all of that. We're building you a new and revised budget book that I think the board will be really pleased with. And right now, we're in the process of really going through those, even though we've gone through the line by line with each of our administrators. Now we look at that in a much bigger picture, see how it all fits, and we're really trying to bridge our expenditures with our revenues so that we can build a budget that supports a strong academic program while also putting forth a responsible tax levy to the community. We'll have much more accurate projections once student course selection is underway. It's very hard to do the budget with, to build the budget with real precision until we put out the course catalog and we know what kids are interested in taking so we could build that staffing. So to that end, if you, I did pass out to the board a proposed budget review calendar. If you can just take a look at that for a second. So it's tweaked a little bit. So in the past, from what I understand, in the past, the board has gotten a detailed line-by-line budget, and this year what we have done to refine that process a little bit more is we've asked, each of our administrators to also write a narrative that speaks to what their needs are within the budget, how it ties to the district goals, how it ties to our work in the shared valued outcomes, so you can really have a sense of it will tell a greater story. I always think budgets reflect our values, and budgets tell stories about what we aspire to achieve. And so the budget book will have not only that narrative information, it will also have very detailed information about what is included in those lines, what they support. But in order to really build the budget with precision, the staffing becomes very, very important to that process. So in the past, you've gotten the superintendent's budget in early January, and what I'm proposing is that we start our budget process on January 11th as we normally would. We do that, and what I would do on that evening is give the board a general overview, talk about what are the major drivers of the budget, what are the priorities that exist within the budget, and then to really take us through the calendar. What I would propose that we do is look at the superintendent's budget, which would be the more detailed, this is my proposed budget to the board, on February 15, and that would give me an opportunity to give you a much more precise line-by-line budget with regard to staffing. And then we would dig into on that same night, we would dig into the transportation and facilities and transfer to capital lines, and then in the following meeting, we'd really dig very deeply into instruction, and then wrap up with revenue sources and debt service and benefits and fund balance. So we sort of kick everything out a little bit longer so our projections are much more accurate for the board. And then the board is, as we've identified in the past, the board adopts your budget on March 29. So it gives you time to give us some feedback and reflection. So that's where we are in that process, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Sarah?
What?
Did you have a question?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate your thoughts on the revised timeline so that we can have something that's more specific, more accurate, et cetera, so we can make our decisions. And I don't know if this question is for you or for Olivia. At what point do we feel we know a good number on the big expense drivers, which would be, of course, I think at any point we know contractually in terms of pay, because that's obviously a big expense driver, so I think we're good on that. But do we already feel, or are we still waiting on good numbers from the state on what our pension and healthcare costs will be? And if there's some other major cost driver I'm overlooking, please let me know.
We already have some of those numbers, but the biggest driver, like Peter said, is the staffing piece. That will drive, most of the numbers.
And we have that.
That's when, it will all depend on the schedule.
The number of people, thank you.
Correct. It will depend on the schedule. So we will give you a package, but it has to be tweaked at that point. Right, Peter?
Right.
And the pension and healthcare?
Pension, we do have the numbers for pension already.
Health?
For next year.
And health?
Health, we do, health is a very, one that is based on a calendar year. You do not know, we know the numbers for calendar year 18. We do not know the numbers for calendar year 19.
Okay.
So that is something that we have to add a factor to whatever we have in 18. And it's something that the business officials in this quadrant, we discuss, and then all of us come up with a number, because we know that healthcare cost is increasing. So there's always something that we have to tag on, and you never know that number. They don't give us those numbers in a 2-year span.
Right.
It's only on, so we only know it for half a year. We don't know it for the other half of our fiscal year.
And on the revenue side, will we know the state aid numbers before we hit our
We will know
deadlines for submitting
we will know the CPI, which is the driver of the tax
the
levy.
tax cap? But what about
We will
state
know
aid?
the governor's budget, but we would not know what we are going to receive from the legislature. In fact, last week, they released the tax-based growth factor, which is the brick and mortar project. That's one factor that is used in the calculation of the tax levy. Unfortunately, for some reason, I don't think Nassau County is able to give their numbers to the state. So all the other school districts in the state have gotten their tax-based growth factor, except for school district in Nassau County. So those are some of the limitations that we have in projecting the revenue side of the budget. But I hope by March, we'll get most of those figures. Even if we don't get the state aid from the legislature, we will get the governor's state aid figures.
Is there
Right, so when
any
the,
remedy with this issue with Nassau County?
oh, I don't know. But as far as the governor, let me back up for a second. The governor will put out his, the executive budget in January. And then it goes back and forth until it gets reconciled and the legislature adopts a budget. That has to be done by April 1st typically, and it usually has been done by April 1st. The current governor has not had, maybe last year was the
Last year
first
we did
time.
not
Last
do
year.
that
Was the
deadline,
first
right.
time. But generally, the executives, the governor's state aid proposals are lower than what generally comes to be in the final budget. So what we would do for the purposes of building the budget is whatever the governor proposed in his budget, that's the revenue number that we would budget for in the proposed budget. And then to the extent that that becomes finalized before the board adopts a budget, we would use the more accurate number. And if not, we would go with the proposal. As far as Nassau County goes, I'm not quite sure how to fix the Nassau County inefficiencies.
And so what concerns me a little bit about it was the region seemed to have sort of scaled back their proposal for increases
did.
in foundation aid in response to the fact that state sales tax revenues were lower this year than they'd been previously. So that feels like a real pressure point to me.
Correct.
Well, I think the greater pressure is the tax legislation in Washington and the uncertain impact on the states. So a lot of things can be in play depending what happens in Washington.
Yes.
Okay.
Peter, can I
Yes,
just ask,
ma'am.
go back a little bit?
Absolutely.
The Bach-Harrison test, is it available to review?
Is it available to be reviewed by whom?
No, can we take a look at the test? Is that available to look at?
I think, yeah, you should come in and take a look at it, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just clarification, that test is going to be given to grades
7 through 12.
7 through 12, early January,
Yep.
turnaround time
It's
of,
about 4 to 6 weeks
and then that information will be available
to everybody.
to everyone? Okay. I'm assuming, I'm hoping that since we did our last youth development survey, the YDS, in 2015, that the behaviors are very much linked, so we can do a proper comparison of what the trends have been.
So we'll be able to, that's a really good question, and that's the limitation to using a different instrument. So we won't be able to have a direct correlation, but we feel that the instrument is a little bit better. So we had the youth development survey it's an off year for the youth development survey. So if we wanted to use that instrument, we would have to wait until next year, and we didn't want to wait until next year to do that. So that left us with the Pride survey or the Bach-Harrison to look at, and we did a good deal of research on it, and the recommendation from our social workers and some of our community members who have some experience in this was that the Bach-Harrison was really the better standard
I've
with
heard
which
that as
to
well.
use. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, yeah, I guess absolutely. That's all I had. I just want to wish everybody Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we'll see you next time we see you will be in January.
Okay.
So, are there any objections to doing it in this way? No? Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to move on to the approval of the minutes from the November 30th, 2017 meeting. Did I have a motion?
Motion?
And I have a second. Any comments or questions? I'm going to abstain from voting because I didn't stay the whole meeting. So, all in favor? Got it? The next is, we're going to talk about the update on the goals.
We could if you wanted to. It's up to you. If you want
I'd rather
to,
move on to the high school.
I think that is
Let's do that.
precisely the right idea.
Okay, let's do that. So would you like us to sit out there?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
So the board should have the presentation in Dropbox. If you want to follow along, it'll also be up on the screen, and you also have hard copies.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I am here to present the report on student achievement for the high school. And I've done a presentation each year. And what was different in my preparation for this particular evening is that we turned over every stone possible that we could find to look at data in a bunch of different ways. It's very fine-grained, is tracking the amount of participation in the orchestra and band over the past 7 years, to look at every single way that we could to find out how our students are doing. And I'm extremely proud of where the high school is. This is now my 9th year as principal, and I reflected back on my early years and looked back at that data. And now that the data I'm presenting as a 5-year span or 4-year span, you still can see continuous growth. But it's really fascinating to remark on some of the ways that the school has evolved while maintaining what makes us unique. I think that's really essential in terms of the degree to which students engage in the full aspect of their school. One of the themes of this presentation, and there's a lot of data, a lot of charts, a lot about how students are doing on the measures that we see. I did that specifically because I can embellish that with anecdotes, but I want you to see the actual data. And I also want to caution all of us to recognize that so much of what students do happens on all 180 days of the school year. In some cases, these tests represent the performance on one particular day, which assesses what they've learned over the course of time. But they're really doing incredible things in their classrooms, and I want to share some of the ways that has evolved specifically this year, and also looking forward to what's ahead. I do think that when we look at the test scores in particular, we have to remember that from just a health and wellness perspective, which is going to be a major theme of mine, we have to be cognizant that this is a time of great anxiety among young people in general. And even the cover of Education Leadership is about mental health in schools. And it's something that we're looking at North Shore. And I want to share with you, I think, what is a very good approach that we're taking to address that. It is as embedding into the curriculum versus doing it as an add-on with guest speakers or the like. And I will share more of that. So just a quick preview, I will give you lots of standardized assessment data, research exams. I So I like looking at the consistency by which our students are performing. We do have this data as much as we want. It's all public data, and we can assemble any piece of this that you'd like to see more. Global history and geography is something. It's an area I'm very proud of this transition, and I can speak from personal experience. I was an administrator in the district for the K-12 social studies, and the truth of the matter is that our students are better writers now than they've ever been. They're able to take materials from many sources and create new information. When you look at the disaggregated data, you can see a significant change in how they're doing on the written portions of the exam. It makes a big difference. When I was the director, we were very strong in multiple choice, very weak on the written section. The scores were still okay, but that big shift in mastery is really coming as a result of their ability to create new information from multiple sources, which is very much what the AP exam is shifted to, what IB exam is shifted to. Our students are comfortable with the unknown, and that's a theme throughout every discipline of why our students continue to improve over time. In 2016, and by the way, the reason that I'm showing you both here is just today, the 2017 data was released, literally today. So those other slides were, Ms. Masiello took me into Excel. We had to build all of those. The data was just released today. That's why I'm showing you both. So you can see our students are doing really well with the mastery rate and with our peers. And again, here. And I think it's fascinating, even with us and with other schools, you can see many people are up in that 95 to 97% range. It looks like, we're in the middle of the pack. That's with 95% passing. And then you can see with our mastery rules. You can see the trend continues. If you look at here is our shift in U.S. history. Again, you can see that mastery has continued to rise. This is an excellent performance of our students. It's an extremely department that has a very clear vision on what students should be able to do. So it's not about just knowing things, it's being able to do. And this is a really great marker of how they're going to succeed in college when they're faced with the unexpected. Very, pleased with this. You can see here, the chart on the left, that's with a 98%. It looks very much middle, but that's because there's such a strong emphasis of that high. So it's a test that many students do very well on. But if you compare it to the county and state, which will go on the next slide, you'll see just how different the North Shore of Nassau County is to the rest of, here we go. So you can see New York State has a passing rate of about 80, we have one about 98, 99, and that's regional, that's not unique to our school. And then you see the mastery rate, really excellent mastery rates, and that really the difference comes in their written communication. It's clear when you look at how the data falls out. Earth science is an interesting area. My eyes were open to this when comparing us to our peer schools. We've been very stagnant in this area, and it's something that I know Mr. Mitchell and I have talked about, of looking at the transition from our 9th graders to our 10th graders. It's very well known, one of the legends of North Shore High School is how tough honors chemistry is, how tough chemistry is. Chemistry. When you talk to the students who did focus groups, they talk about chemistry. They've heard stories about Mr. Galati's chemistry. Legendary. And so when you're looking at earth science, it's a stagnant area that I absolutely know we need to look at in terms of preparing that transition into chemistry better. And I know this because you can see even with our peers, this is an area where I know that there's more potential. Our students are no different than students in another area, and I think a little bit more focus. You will see anytime we're given a task to focus on, we achieve great things. Here's this year with our peer schools. And I'm going to show you an example of my point. When we really put our minds to something, we make differences. Here's chemistry. I used to present at the board, I think of the chemistry slide, and I need like a cold sweat because chemistry was always a problem with very low passing rates and very low mastery rates. The department, we have a great, excellent staff in chemistry. They've worked really hard with the students, and you can see a nice steady improvement. I am very proud of this. I'm proud of it because we focused on it, we zeroed in on it, and it takes time. In 1 year, it's not going to change. You do a lot of support for the curriculum to look at what are we and how are we students to be able to do. Here's And especially at the Regents level, we've had an interesting history in terms of who took this test. In 2009, 10, 11, there were a lot of community concern with the student performance on that. And then in 11, 12, the decision was made because it's a non-required Regents that there's an option to take the test or not. So those scores of those 90, 80, 92, 93, 92, up to 15, 16, that was all options. So kids could opt in. They take the midterm, they would see how they did, and they would be advised whether or not to take it. In 16, 17, everyone in the Regents physics class was required to take the exam. So David was interesting because we don't know the story of any other district. But I just wanted us to know our story, and I can tell you now, this is 2016 Regents exam. So that was last June, that was 15-16 school year, when it was the students who were opting into that. So you can see the difference when everyone was required to take it. So we have a lot of work to do here, because if you look at the mastery, that is absolutely something, an area that we need to address and increase. And you'll see especially in the AP and the IB physics. So I look up every single school that's on this list and look at the criteria for entry. And I do think it's important for us to remember, once we get to the upper level courses, that we have self-selection. So any student can take any course that they want. In many schools, there are gates, such as you must have a 90 in honors chemistry in order to take this class. So I think it's really important to look at what are the policies that exist around that, even with us. That's why I will always share with you any insight to the data that I have in our school. Geometry switched to Common Core in 2014-15. So you can see that the duplication year, our students took both. So you can see the difference in performance on the traditional geometry versus the Common Core. It's been, regionally a very interesting thing. I was surprised to see our where we were in relation to our peers, specifically in the mastery. This slide, I apologize for the highlighting falling off there. There was a lot of discussion among principals about whether or not they counted it, whether or not they were going to report it. This geometry is a very, very interesting change for many schools. It's young students, typically in 9th and 10th grade, and there's also been, regionally for people are opting to not include it on report cards and not count it, and this is something we continue to maintain that our students will continue to achieve. We, have room to grow there. Passing rate is okay. We have to definitely improve in our mastery. But this is something from one year to the next with almost a 10% increase in mastery. It's a good sign on a good trajectory with that. Algebra 2 is another one of those areas where we were asked to focus. We zoomed in, we focused on it. We really analyzed how our students were doing. We listened to students work through problems. We focused much more on problem solving versus just knowing math. It's a process. It's having students encounter the unknown and feel that they are ready to do that. Because in math in particular, especially with a course like this, and geometry, I was all Common Core, you're not told what to do. You are given a problem. You're asked to access everything you know and the skills and do something with it. So that ability to encounter the unknown is a theme that we do throughout. And so you can see here the shift to Common Core was 15-16. In 2014-15, that is the 10th graders. So if you're a member of the class of 2017, if you're a family or a parent of 2017, it's a very interesting year for you because you came through in that bubble. That 14-15 was when the test was basically the state had changed it. The curriculum was different than the test. There was a lot there. So you can see regionally that 14-15 year is interesting. Our students are excellent in Algebra 2. I mean, this is amazing. Again, this is this thing 5 years ago. So these are students who are receiving support either in resource room or in the co-taught classes, and these are really remarkable results. So I often say, so this is the difference between the anecdote and the data. Our special education students are performing on par with their grade level peers, and they are. So that's a really interesting thing for, I think, just the board to recognize that our students at all levels are able to perform very high. And even the fact that we have some of those rates in mastery is just astounding and very special. All right, so this is an awkward segue going from that to this. So this slide shows the total number of exams taken by our students in the month of May 2017. That's a lot. We gave 617 AP exams, 369 IB exams, all in 1 month. With some students taking tests, 12, 14 school days in May, taking different tests. So I think that's something we have to consider and think about when we look at the whole in terms of how much time we spend in the mode of assessment and making sure that we do something with the assessment. We're putting that time into that. So I'll talk through some of these slides about how we're handling the assessment data. So this is a lot of exams that our students are taking. You can see the number of students. So those are individual students. They're not like duplicates. So if 357 different students sat for 617 exams. The first series of slides are going to deal with the IB program. I'll talk first about participation, and then I'll go into the AP. Okay, class that just graduated, our first cohort, large class, 75% of them took at least one course or another, and I will share with you all of their performance results on that. In year 2, 128 students took at least one or more. We had 37 diploma program students, so it's about 15% of the class. I'll go quickly through these, you've seen these before. This year's senior class, much smaller class, 67%. More retention in year 2. Again, 37 diploma program students represented 17%. So it's around that 15 to 17%. In cohort 3, which is the class of 2019, a very much smaller class. Again, it's that same net number, mid-70%, 70% taking at least one, and 70% of diploma program students. So the diploma program students are those taking the full IB program, taking 6 courses, and have the requirements of writing an extended essay, participating in CAS, and taking the degree of knowledge course. The other one shows. The one other interesting thing I want people just to notice is our first year, we had a lot of students taking 1 and 2. You notice in cohort 2, much more taking 2 or 3. So more students are opting for more of the courses. We saw a big change from cohort 1 to cohort 2. If anyone's keeping track, cohort 1 was the class of 2017, which I've been talking about throughout some of the slides. Okay, these are our IB scores for the courses that we have 2 years of data. We've only had one cohort finish the program because it began in 2017 with the first group. Our current series is the second group. So these are the courses that they took the exams for in their junior year. So you can see the difference from 2016 to 2017. And I share this slide so that you are aware that our faculty, we order back all of the exams. IB is different because you have exams throughout the year. So it's not just one day on one test. You are giving assessments throughout the year. And we ordered back all of the assessments, and we got the mark scheme, so we know exactly how they were graded. We have the scores comments on them. So our faculty is able to see the written comments from the person who scored that and understand what we did. So they selected, they wanted to see, we ordered back every single test to look at that. You can see the difference between year 1 and year 2 and how they used that data thoughtfully. It was really part of their professional development of really understanding what to do with that. And this is just incredible changes in terms of how the course was taught. And this is important to note as we go through all of the assessments that they took, how we handle data and what we do with it once we understand. This was our first year of 2016, so there's a big correction. The blue represents a score of 5, 6, or 7, which is considered very good. 3 and 4 is considered not so great, and a 2 would be considered failing the test. So you can see in year 2, the numbers of students getting a 5, 6, or and we had, I think, 9 sevens in just one testing cycle. Very proud of that. The faculty takes their job very seriously, and they deliver on the fidelity of the programs that they're teaching, whether it's AP, IB. These are the tests for which we have one test given. So only one cohort has taken. This is a class of 2017 in their senior year. So this is seniors in May of their senior year. These are the exams they took. I was not surprised to see the success of the language A. Language A is English. Language B are the world languages. Language A, those teachers crafted that course with so much care. They were they had to predict scores. They knew that they were going to do well, and they were right. They're very diligent about that, and I'll share a little bit more about their approach to the course. Again, this is the first year, and we'll have comparative data next year. And I'm going to come back to biology and physics when we get to the AP slides, because the students who are in those courses also took the AP exam. So this is the total how our students did overall. So interestingly, statistically, this happened to be, we are so consistent. The first year we did 100 exams, 58 students got a 5, 6, or 7, 2 got 2s, 40 got 3 or 4. 369 exams, 215 got a 5, 6, 7, identical percentages from one year to the next, which is very interesting to see how that you can't even, I don't even think I could have used that algebra to create like a perfect array like that. Okay, so this, because we don't have comparison, the way that IB does it, global averages, but it's important to note that math studies, we were a little bit above, look at those averages, 5.2, 4.8, 4.13 in math and chemistry. So the math course is a more rigorous. Math studies is a little bit differently rigorous. It's more of a statistical basis, like deeper algebra, and the math SL course has more of the pre-calculus elements. So if I look at the next year, I put those 3 courses first. You can see that the first 3 courses are the ones that they took for the second time. So you can see that they're really separating out in the global average from one year to the next in those first 3 courses. The other ones are all the first year. So I would be willing to, because I know the faculty, I know the students, those numbers in terms of the spread in the global average will be increased as we go on. You can see physics is definitely lower, and that's going to be a trend that we see on the upper level physics courses, which is a big message to us in terms of where we're going to address our next level of work. So now this is going into AP exams. I included the total score questions for IB. Here's how our students are doing percentage of 3, 4, and 5 compared to the state averages and compared to the U.S. That's the report that the College Board generates for us. That's just data right from the College Board. So you can see that. In 2016, we had very few AP exams. And I'll show you each exam and the numbers of students who took it. Talk a little bit about it. So 2016, the junior class, very few IB exams. In 2017, the junior class took many more AP exams. In some classes, 100% of the IB class, 100% of those students also took the AP. So I'll be reading each of those. But I just want you to see the consistency by which our students are performing. In 2017, those were predominantly students in IB classes taking AP. Okay, the first slide. This is Calc AB. Now, this is a concerning slide. There's a lot to be said for that. This is the seniors in 2017, so it's the class of 2017. The numbers of students are in parentheses at the bottom. So you can see the section increased dramatically. This is the highest number of students we have ever had in the course for the data that I have at my disposal. So it's about 12 years of data that I have in my office. I can probably dig deeper. We've never had that number. But that alone does not explain those results. There's personnel changes. There's also much, we have already done the work, so this next cohort is going to improve in terms of the transition out of the math SL course into first year, again, I showed you the Cameron results on the IB slides. So in 2016, they all scored 3, 4, 5, but no, they did not. 66% first 4, 5. In 2017, 88 and 50. So that was 8 out of 8. So every one of those students was in the IB class. Chemistry is a course I think we can look at where they take it. Now students take honors chemistry in 10th grade. Many of them take the IB or AP chemistry in 11th and 12th grade. So we can look at maybe the organization of where we do that to capture more students to get benefit from that course. So AP Bio is a really interesting thing for us to look at. The numbers have shifted a lot over time. You see 2012, when we had, in 2012 we had 113 students. And there's always been an inverse relationship of the enrollment in biology with physics. It used to be an ongoing discussion in the department. So that was an interesting year, 2012. But you can see in 2016, 96 students took the test. Those were the performance. That was the first year of IB. And in 2017, 61. So there was a little bit of correction that occurred. Again, in 2016, those were the juniors. So this is all taken the junior year. Class of 2017 was the class with that 96 students. What I'm really pleased to see is that these students are in IB biology. But if you look at how they're doing, this was 61 of 61, by the way. Every single student that took this test was in IB biology. So it wasn't as though some chose to take AP. They all took the AP. 61 students enrolled, 61 students took the test. And I'm just happy to see that regardless of what course they're in, the students are able to do well on both. And it's the quality of the teaching. And I remarked before that if it were so easy to just give a teacher a curriculum and have it be taught away, then we wouldn't need, teaching would not be an art, and administrating would not be an art. So I'm really proud to see that we are there. I still think we can even do better, but I'm just glad to see that the students aren't being hurt by taking both these exams. Many of these students may opt to go to physics in 12th grade, and we like that, because we want them to have that experience. So then we'll continue to go on to year 2. It's not a requirement that you take both years of this course. The first year of IB is AP Bio. Then they continue on to year 2, and they do independent inquiry. So I think that's an important slide to focus on. Again, physics is a concern of ours. This is something, it's an area that we're taking a very serious look at in terms of the readiness of the students coming in, the math skills required to do well. These results are just not acceptable in any way whatsoever. And so this is a similar way that the AP, the College Board, and IB both, they give us very informative instructional planning reports. So there has been also personnel changes in this course for this current school year. So this is an area that we'll be watching very closely as we continue throughout the school year. English Comp is the 11th grade course. So 62 students, I have the notes. That class had 97 students in it. So not all of them took it in 2017, but in 2016 it had 100 students and only 12 took it. They were told, oh, you will not do okay. And there was other like murmur in the community that you won't be ready for this test. The teachers of the ID language course are excellent. And they also had taught have I'd say the finest art department in the world. The students who engage in that, I mean, they're just, this is the photo side is the 2D design. The students create a whole portfolio. The visual art is a complete portfolio of many pieces. The thing about AP is it's about a lot. They produce a ton of work, and they do it very well. It's pretty impressive to see consistently our students are always in that 4 or 5 ranges since the course. So the photo is relatively new. It actually, I think, began maybe around this time. Relatively new. I wanted to share this also with the board just to see that our students are continuing to be AP scholars. So IB came in 2016. Like I did say, we took fewer exams that year. Really similar to 2013 with the AP scholars. 2017, we got more students take AP exams, as you saw throughout the world. Students opted to take both, they did well. So we had the AP scholar numbers are remaining intact while they're doing well. So we have IB diplomas and AP scholars. Many of our students who are diploma program students are also AP scholars, AP scholar distinction. So they're leaving here, you see graduation, have all those scores and things leave. They also have a lot of other accolades and resumes this long, which is good. But we have to balance that with what are we doing to our kids with all of these things to be measured up against them. So I love looking at this data the most. I had the good fortune of having an intern, so I was asking her to look at reports, find everything she possibly could. This is just this year, so I'm going to continue to present this every year so you can see the trends of that. I think it's really important for us to analyze. So what I did do is I did dig deeper in terms of the music ensembles because I also heard a comment about that. And anytime I hear a comment, it raises a flag in my head. And I want to go looking to see what is really going on. And I'm pleased to tell you the band was in the last 4 years was 80, 81, 78, 81. I mean, very consistent orchestra. Has always been in that 50, the upper one, and then the freshman orchestra around 30. One exception, class of 2017, and 14 when they were freshman orchestra. So it's just important to consider how that plays out. Because if you're a person who is in that class, you look around your freshman orchestra, you're like, no one's in orchestra. The following year, they were 30 again. So it's just important to look at that. So I am looking at every type of data that we can. But this says something when 33% of our students are fall athletes. So that statistic is for this fall. The spring and winter are for the last school year. So we'll continue to look at that. We also printed the roster of every single of our athletic teams and look at the courses they were taking to see. And you would be astonished that of the 35 diploma program students in junior year, it's a very tough year to begin with. 9 of them are varsity athletes. So then we also took play, cast and crew. And you look at all of that, and all but 4 are either president of a club on a varsity team or in the show, in the play. So then we didn't even count robotics, which we would have captured one more. So it's very interesting to look at these students are very busy. To be an athlete, you need practicing every single day. In fact, when you recognize the cross-country team, almost every one of those boys that you greeted they had homework. And I was shocked that they were standing there because they're in the most rigorous program. So we did look at every single roster to make sure that students weren't losing something because they weren't allowing. That being said, I think we have to kind of look at the overall balance of do they have time to actually be present? Yes, they're doing it. Yes, it's on the resume, but how present can they be with all those demands? So all of this is important, but I'm looking at it holistically at is it well? Are the students well? Or are they very anxious because they feel they have so much going on? And we really need to look at that. By speaking to students directly, we want to share about focus groups, talking to them about their experiences. But I just want you to 73% of the class of 2017, and that's that class I've been speaking about, 73% of them went to either the most or highly competitive schools. So that's those are where they were accepted to. So just to kind of make all of this kind of come full circle, this slide shows you the drop. So 40%, no, I'm sorry, this is not, sorry, these are numbers. 40 students were accepted to the most competitive, the 30, only 31 attended. So that means 9 of those students most likely probably rated highly. You can see of those 81, 30 of them opted to go to Berry or competitive or maybe community college. Maybe they went to different, but despite being accepted, so it just shows you that you can't always look at only where they choose to attend, because many more of them, 36 of last year, were accepted to the most competitive, but only 21 students attended those schools to which they were accepted. Similarly, 133 were accepted to highly competitive schools, but only 75 of the students attended that level. So then maybe they may have attended, different tiers of school. So I just wanted you to see there is how you look at the data is also important. So I've tried to allude a little bit to it. As far as the shared values, I had a faculty meeting, I passed out the values, I had to engage the faculty in an activity where I asked them to reflect on their practice. And the thing that came to the surface, they all wrote little vignettes to me. I asked the teacher leaders to assemble the teacher work and the student work. So I have a whole bunch of samples of that. I went through every single piece of that, and I saw that students are problem solvers. Our students more than ever are willing to take a challenge and do something with it. It used to be, and again, this is anecdotal, so forgive me in this one thing. Students wanted a list. They wanted to know, tell me what to do. Give me this, 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 this. They're much more comfortable now having to figure that out, having to develop a question, develop a plan, and do something with it. And I think one of the best examples, and I kind of put it in this order on purpose, is that in 2 courses in the 12th grade, and in language courses throughout, looking at problems, looking at issues facing either the region, our country, global issues, and these are very complex, layered issues. And it's relatively open-ended. They craft a question, they develop a research question, and writing as a means of learning, not just learning to write. We're also using long-term assignments to help work on management organization, to focus on executive functioning. The English department really abandoned this need for muscle content and focused on what does it mean to be a strong student. So we're focusing on study skills, on how we effectively plan a long-term assignment. It's something that we've long needed, and we found that time to be able to do that. These are just some of the reflection questions that the students are engaging in. And I could show you some of what the students write. They are given time to actually answer and engage these questions, thinking about themselves. Just pausing to ask yourself these questions is something that is an effective strategy. And when it relates to study skills, they're also supportive of it. It's not just asking the question, we're also giving them support and resources in terms of how to do that on a schedule. Okay? And I will close just saying that you're invited. I think the best way to get a sense of the school is to come in and see it. I run an open book. I will give you any information, any data, but I love when people come into the school and see the students. It's a hard-working faculty who cares deeply about continuous growth, and the kids are incredible. So just walking through college, you'll never believe it's first, it's beautiful. Every single day you come in, looks brand new. Two, it feels like a campus, college campus. The kids are in there, in the library, they're using their time wisely. And there are definitely things that we're always going to need to work on, but we're in a great place. That's all I got.
Sure. Is that what you're planning on? Yeah.
So, Albert, where are you? There you are. Thank you very much. That was very well done.
Thank you.
Really comprehensive and thorough. Does the board have any questions for Albert or any of the folks who are here tonight?
I'm sure we do. Is anyone ready to go first? Sarah?
Oh, come on.
All right, I have various questions.
I have just a straightforward factual question
Okay, go
to start
ahead.
with. When you were talking about and I'm sorry I don't know this, the Common Core ELA, the passing rate and the mastery rate, what test are we talking about? What grade?
That's the English Regents, the 11th grade
That's
English.
the 11th grade Regents.
Yes, that's the 11th grade English. It's the only English Regents.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Herman?
I think the results of everything the school is doing and the teachers are doing is outstanding. But I have a couple of questions that are really somewhat tougher questions. There are items that are harder to measure, but are still enormously important. So how successful are we in terms of ethical values, and how do you measure that? How successful are we in terms of tolerance of diversity, which is really a key issue for our country, and how do we measure that? And then, since I see a lot of students in higher ed, and I talk to a lot of colleagues in higher ed, we have a sense that there is more dishonesty and cheating on the part of students. What's happening in high schools, because they're not just starting in terms of this academic dishonesty when they get to college. What's happening in the high schools, and what are you doing to counter what's happening?
I think the first two questions that you posed, there are some instruments out there. We could actually, I mean, there are some climate things that we could start to track, which might be very valuable data. The third point, the academic integrity, is something that we take extremely seriously. One of the things that part of the authorization process for IB about 5 years ago. You have to establish basically an honor code. But even prior to that, we established a policy of academic integrity. It is something that is introduced in every single class. We actually have a code. I can give you a copy of that. And there are a series of, it is rooted in education. We absolutely want to help them understand the difference between summarizing and copying, or what does it mean to paraphrase and proper citation. It's a very important topic in the English department. They actually do full lessons on that, not just one or two, but it's a constant thing. And we are actually very frequently, students are coming up against that policy, and it's a policy we have never once budged on. And there are basically 3 stages. The first one, the students, they do get a 0 on the assignment, and they can redo it for up to, I think it's averaged with a 0. The second time, they don't get credit for the assignment, and there's actually a disciplinary consequence. They have a day of in-school suspension, and we log every incident, and every one of those involves a conversation. And then the third, they actually lose credit for that course for the quarter. So it's a relatively that's very serious. It's something that I personally introduce it to students from a policy perspective, that each of the teachers are expected to discuss how it looks in their class. There is the garden variety cheating, where students will give answers, take a picture. There's a lot with technology that they're doing. So we go over that, like the black and white, and then there's also the discussion of what are the things that you might not realize are actually a lack of they're violating academic integrity. And there's I know that all of our research teachers also do that, because especially as you're doing research, students struggle with the concept of the idea is not mine. The idea is someone else's. Through the source that I read, how do I properly identify that idea? And they get very confused because they don't think they copied the word. And so that's something that, as the high school, we have taken extremely head-on and very seriously from an educational perspective, but then also ensuring that they understand that there are consequences with National Honor Society. It's something that I tell the freshmen. I say, you may not think this is a policy that will ever impact you, but it absolutely will, because it's so easy today to go online and just look up anything and to, so it's something that we're constantly evolving and reviewing, but it's a very frequent topic.
Do we use Turnitin.com or other
Absolutely.
tools like
We
that?
use Turnitin.com. And that has the limitations. It also needs a teacher to actually look. The percentage match only does so much. And sometimes it raises the red flag, but the teachers do a lot. They go much further than that. But we
The
do.
red flags are useful. I would
Absolutely.
be very supportive if the school and the superintendent came forward with a climate survey. I actually think that would be a very important instrument for North Shore.
Yep.
I agree.
Okay. I'd like to learn more about it before we do it. So if you could at some meeting sort of discuss it with us. Herman, did you have any other questions?
That's it for me.
Okay. Anyone else? Rich?
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was interesting to see what's going on in terms of the statistics in the programs. I have a question about math. If you look at historically what's been happening with the AP, in particular the AP math classes, last year was sort of an anomaly. Do you think that there's a relationship between changing in programs? Prior to this, we had a dedicated Math 11H program, and now with the switch to IB, do you think that has had a significant impact in terms of what's happening in the calculus classes?
I think it did Yes, especially the first year. I think that the enrollment was also a factor, and I think that having the same teacher teaching the 11th grade honors course and the AP course previously in all those other years was also a really important asset. I think it was the same students and the same teacher for 2 years in that upper level, and that's where I think that you can never take the teacher out of in the equation, but this is the number of students who took the course and the degree to which many of them were ready because of the course that preceded it. Absolutely. And I think that we've actually eliminated the recommendation that any students, they perceive that if they're in IB math studies, the students perceive that it's a advanced course. The truth of the matter is it's not that advanced. The one course, it has a unique approach, but it is very much like a Common Core. But they really need to be in that SL, the math SL, which has the pre-calculus intentionality into it, and that's why we'll have a little bit more data. I'll definitely have more data at the conclusion of this year, but our preliminary investigation based on how the students are performing in the course now is it's going to be a major correction toward that. But that is absolutely what happened in AB, was the number of students and the alignment of the preceding course. But we've even corrected that course as well, because it was definitely needed.
Thank you.
Yep, Sarah?
Dave, do you want to go ahead?
Go.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead,
Kelly.
Dave.
Okay. Albert, thank you. It was I thought a very strong presentation. I appreciate it. Couple quick questions and then maybe a couple larger questions. The historic trends on the special ed students, is this the first year we've sort of tracked that, or do you have that, or?
I actually thought of, I had requested some anecdotal information, so I had enrollment statistics historically, like the number of students in the advanced courses, but I thought that was a wrong approach, and so then because I had the report card data, I use that. I can very easily, I would very much love to, I will do that for my own, so I'll give you a copy. I'll present a copy to Dr. Girizzo to look at. It's fascinating, just look even at the numbers of students in the program and then their performance on each of the
And the
exams.
success, that's
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and I think that as the school has improved on the performance, so has that population, and that's really where that reward school designation has been coming through each year, because we've continually closed the gap, because you have to be gap closing. So although I have a sense of what it might look like, I want to collect it, so I'll give you a copy.
it's interesting, because in the elementary school level, which I'm more familiar with, the co-teaching, the integration of the kids in the school working together, is sort of,
Yeah.
it rises the whole.
Yeah.
The whole.
Well, that's the other thing that I could report for hours and hours about all the amazing things. The other day, Kevin came to my office saying, "Hey, you should see this really cool thing happening." It was the Buddy program, which has students in our life skills program working with other students. They were playing Kahoot, which it's just there's a lot of things like that. It's very much a part of like who we are. That there are students in our district, there are students in our school, and it's just very incredible.
So on that same vein, Dave, if I could just interrupt if you get that data going back for special ed students, can we also get a comparison of data with other schools?
Yes.
Okay. Because I'd like
No,
to see
yes,
that.
yes, you can. I would just put a little asterisk at the bottom saying we do not necessarily know the classification rates or
Right.
the process. It's very much a
Right.
committee decision. So I will absolutely do that, though. For the same,
I see what you're saying. It would be very difficult to compare, but it would just be interesting
yeah,
to see.
that's why it's hard to also compare. It's hard to compare almost anything because we don't know the school's policies about who enters in what levels. But I will get that. I'll do it with the same. I'll do it in the same way I presented these with the same
Right.
peer schools, and I'll do it with that population.
I'm sorry, Dave, go ahead.
That actually is a perfect segue for where I was going with my next question, which is, you sort of presented two points of comparison. One is neighboring schools, and one is the trend of our students, both as they travel through the classes, but also from year to year, taking the same class. The AP and IB data, is that available for other schools? I know the state
No.
reports the regions. It's not.
No.
So even the data we report for our school,
we can
that's for
we can
internal use.
ask like I actually had data with our first year. I had data from Locust Valley. We asked some of the other coordinators if they'd be willing to give it, but a lot of schools aren't willing to give it. IB does. I think they may have a domestic report because they do the global one that you can access. I can see what kind of comparison we can do. The only thing we ever get are the Newsweek things, which are Newsday, which are not always accurate.
That's correct.
So it's only asking, and then they're also, it's kind of, you never know if what you're getting is what you're getting.
That was one of my questions as well.
Thanks.
I can look into I will look into the ability to get comps on all of that.
One thing that struck me, you mentioned the 61 out of 61 students who took it was the bio AP?
Yes,
61 out of 61 IB students.
Took the AP.
And then you also mentioned there was a real spike this year that's upward to 73% of our students are taking, or trying, I guess, at least one IB class.
That's just been consistent all 3 years.
It has been, okay.
Yeah.
And how are students counseled in that direction? Is there a policy? Is that done through the guidance department? Or
Yeah,
just tell us-
it is all through, it's all individualized, it's through an individual, conference. Prior to that meeting, what happens is, normally it'd be the IB coordinator, would go into every single 10th grade English class and talk about what a certificate course is versus the full program, and then we're able to identify students who have a potential interest. Those students who have even a maybe, we invite their families. We have a personal invitation that your child said that they may be interested in the full diploma or taking several courses. Come to this night, find out more for the family. In addition to that, the coordinator sits with each counselor in the individual session to talk about that. And they consider the whole picture. Like, what are you doing? Is what you're doing outside, is it going to be, in your best interest? I think that the conversations have typically been on the relative competitiveness and appeal to colleges. And I think with I'm talking about you because you're all here. But with Linda here, I think that conversation is going to be much more considerate of the overall wellness factors involved in that decision. The one thing that we did see is the numbers of students taking one or more have been the same, but they're taking a little bit more of those courses. I think the initial fear the first year kind of steered students away from taking multiple. It also steered them away from taking those AP exams. We saw an immediate correction with cohort 2 and cohort 3 in terms of their kind of comfort. A lot of it was a fear of the unknown because it was new. But there are a lot of supports in place through the staff, I would say, for IB that supports the students managing all of that requirement. And there's a lot of online technology tools that can help with that.
Just one
But not having a coordinator has been difficult. Just for we haven't had a coordinator since September. We do have one now. She starts in January, so that's been a little bit of a missing factor. It's just vital in terms of the shepherding of the students and being a resource for them as a sounding board.
So just one final. The data is so much more easy to put into charts. They were great charts, and I love them. I appreciate the way you printed them out for us so we could follow as we went. But the latter part of the presentation is harder to gauge those things. One thing you mentioned was about students traveling abroad. I wonder if there's a way from that small cohort, because not small, but that group, to be able to tie that type of experience that goes outside the classroom, that goes beyond testing, but does speak to the shared values that we're talking about, does speak to hands-on learning, and tie those students to determine something about performance on these tests and in college acceptance and all the other things that we use as numerical data to help us better understand how those harder to quantify aspects relate to student success.
Yeah, I mean, we could actually, that's data that we could collect. We could, look at how those students and see if they're, the one challenge is that the timing of it, because some of them are seniors, they go in the spring, and is there really a nexus? It would be a difficult thing. But, I think an interesting, I always like focus groups. I know that's still anecdotal. But I also think that they're able to articulate the extent to which it does have an impact that may or may not show up on that one day in May that they sit for that one test. I think also the trips are different. I think the performance tour, you learn a lot about working together, the music performance tour. You learn a lot about working together. You learn a lot about what it means to be a working musician. You also learn a lot about culture and the value of music and just the value of what you have. The students going to Cuba, that's an experience they will never forget on so many levels.
Yeah,
but
I will never forget hearing them come back and tell their stories, as you say, about the things that they learned that they just
and
would
so
never have learned.
I'll never be able to quantify that on a test, and I'm not sure that I want to. I understand that it's about the test, but it's also about the world and the extent to which their eyes are open to something other than themselves. And we don't have a how to be a good person. If there was an AP be a good person, everyone would take it, and we'd have a measure. But we don't have that. So we do speak to the students. And then the language trips, I think, are also different because of the exchange factor. Because it's not only going, it's also you are hosting a student from another country in your home. You learn a lot from that we may need to look at a different way of measuring that. That may or may not appear on any of the charts that I presented.
Okay, Sarah?
Thank you. Thank you for this analysis and the data. I think we all really appreciate it. I particularly appreciated, as Dave indicated too, this data on the special education students and how they're doing. Last year, we started looking at this equity data and started doing data analysis, and I think there's a lot more to be done there. So, but it did make me think, and your data reminded me, did we look at all about how low-income students were doing in particular? Because that seemed to be something that was very striking from the data we looked at last year.
I did look at that. I looked at income level. I looked at students receiving speech services. I looked at students who are learning English for the first time. I didn't present all of that. I have that. I could present that.
You can't. No, of course.
Yeah. It's some of them, the sample size is so small that it's when we're talking about single digits for certain of those. When I said I overturned every rock, I literally went to the garden and was like, let me look under everything and just see what's there. And that's where, given a path of inquiry, if we're wondering about that, I'd love to actually just present and say, here's what I can tell you about the last 5 years in this regard. And these are some things that have happened in that time. Like, there's been a change in how E&L services are provided. That might be interesting for us to look at. Is there a connection to how those students are performing better or worse because that model has changed? And I think that those are the types of things that would be very interesting to share. I got down to the point of
I
editing.
agree. It's infinite. Anything in particular that you saw that you think we should look at?
I do think that our E&L students, which there is some overlap with some of the other criteria when we look at student data, in terms of, if you actually look at the names, some students exist in many categories. Sure. I think there's an interesting nexus between the E&L students and or special education or reading, because we can't assume that the issues that are happening in school from a learning perspective are because of language. Sometimes it's literacy. It is possible to be illiterate or weakly literate in your native language from a written communication. So I think we sometimes forget that. We almost think we just have to teach them English and then it'll all be okay. But that's not necessarily, there are gaps in education. So when I look at it, I think it's the E&L population that I'm most concerned with. Not from the amount of support and resources and care and concern, but from the learning needs. To me, that is what I noticed when I look at it. It's almost like they are succeeding, but often at age 20, 21. So I think that's something I want to dig in more deeply. And although they are small numbers, it's a growing number in our district.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for sharing that. I was also, so when we look at a range of scores, and we're basically looking most often at passing and mastery, I'm thinking the answer is probably yes, but do we ever look at sort of, when you're looking at like quintiles, I guess, whether our lowest quintile versus the state or neighboring districts versus our highest quintile versus the state or neighboring districts, do we have a sense of just sort of from top to bottom where we are?
Yeah, oh yes, yes, we do. I mean, yeah,
Which is?
What do you mean?
I was like, I'm just wondering if there is some difference about where we're stronger or weaker.
Regents data is so difficult to look at because so much of the performance, especially if you look at our neighbors, we're so similar in terms of those very, very high passing rates on all of the key graduation requirement exams. So those comparisons we're talking 99% to 97%, 95. So it doesn't really inform a lot. The new Common Core exams are arranged in quintiles, so we're able to look at that data differently than the old tests that the state has, so that would be like the U.S. history. Global will be changing soon. So basically only the math, geometry, algebra 2, and English, we have it in quintiles. Everything else is just passing mastery. So they're changing the data that they have on there, and so that also allows us to look at that. But the most really cool parts to look at is the disaggregated data. Look at how we're doing on parts. Because I looked at even with AP, look at historically how our students are doing on the free response. You can actually see the shift in our students' growth and their ability to handle the documents and then writing about the documents. You can see that in the trends, both in the humanities and in the sciences on the constructed response or the free response sections. I think looking at just the 6-point question on the math exam is an interesting thing, just focusing on those. It's just easier to do that internally because you don't have that data on other districts because they don't have to choose to either share or slice their data in that way. But I think for our own growth, tracking the intersection of what we're intending to do with new programs and approaches, is that really manifesting itself in a much finer grain look than just overall passing. So that is something that we do at at the level within departments. So, if there's ever any one of those areas, we can, also present that, which is a much finer grain look. It's just for this night, we would be here till tomorrow.
Absolutely.
But I'd love to do that. I love looking at the data.
And the only point, and I think a couple of people have talked about this, is sort of like the reference to how do we know if students are doing well, like their well-being, and sort of like, is there a way that we measure that, particularly in light of the fact that you had almost 1,000 exams taken? Do you have any thoughts about?
I do. I think in particular, and this is something that I've talked to Linda about, I have an expectation that somebody will speak to every single student, like one-on-one, and just say, how are you doing? I just want every student spoken to, just to check in, not to, we got to make your schedule, because that's like a purpose, but I just want everyone just checked out sometimes. And I mean every student. I want to be able to sit here and say, guaranteed, every student just had a conversation with somebody, just checking in on how they're doing, with no agenda, meaning other than to get to know them, to just talk to them, and just to check on their well-being. I think that's important. And I think that the board was very generous in supporting the counselor, so we have caseloads that can do that. We have the commons groups that are arranged by counselors, so a counselor can go in there and just kind of do that, having the teachers pay more attention to changes, to things that they've had. And the faculty has been incredible at reporting to us concerns, and every single time we follow up, and we have learned a lot, and many students have gotten a lot of support. The faculty is such a part of that team. They're with the kids every day. They know. The teachers know the students. And now we're connecting it to telling us, the teachers should not be the therapist, the teacher should not be the counselor. We have people for that. So we've done a lot of education with the faculty, and we're going to continue to do that in terms of educating them on recognizing anxiety. I mean, I think we're just very fortunate, with Linda's arrival and expertise in that area. It's just perfect timing, because it's a need, and it's something that she brings expertise on. But I really do want to be able to say every student has been just talked to.
Joanna, did you have questions?
I just wanted to thank you, Albert, for a very thorough report. It was very well done. I'm very interested in how we're going to assess the whole area of wellness and the kinds of things that we're going to put in place. I absolutely agree with you that this is not a one-shot production, that this needs a total curriculum integration throughout the whole school. I think the kids are coming to us in an emotional state that we've not really seen. I think we make a lot of assumption that kids have the social emotional development or coping skills that they need to have, and I think sometimes we fall short in not providing the means for learning those skills and practicing those skills. So I'm very interested to see what happens in this area.
Thank you. One thing I would like to compare it to is there was a movement, I know when I was in grad school, we're focusing on literacy in the content areas. It can be that same model. You can look at wellness in the content areas. Every teacher is a teacher of writing. Every teacher is a teacher of reading. There are classes in English where they may learn it for particular purposes. Every single teacher in our building teaches students to be a communicator, to be a writer. There's no reason why every teacher can't also just help students learn to deal with challenge and be okay with that, and just to kind of be okay. So I think there's a model there that we can learn from, that I believe that it can be integrated in, versus these one-shot, make it look good on paper, like we brought this speaker and that's just not going to
I
work.
hope so. Thank you. Great job.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. I just had one quick question, because I know we want to move on. The students engaging in arts and athletics that you had this sheet here, am I understanding this, so 226 students engaged in visual arts, and that's 26% of all the students
Correct.
in high school?
Yes.
Okay, so.
That's
when
in one year.
In 1 year.
Yeah.
So when I first glanced at this, my first question was, where's the other 70%, and what are they doing? But I'm realizing now that you don't have robotics in here.
Right.
So there's a lot of other things that are not included in there. So
I
what
started
number-
doing like service and doing Key Club Interact, but it just got too.
And I understand understand that, but
Yeah.
so one number that I would like to see is engagement in something, and what percent of our students are engaged in something. And when you talk about being able to touch every student and the wellness of those students, I think a student's engagement in some activity
Yes.
throughout the year could be a really good indicator, because those small groups really are where
Yes.
they're either affecting each other
Yes.
or have an advisor to affect them. So that's just one number I'd like to see on top of that. But I will hold the rest of my questions. I think, thank you very much. Thank you for all of you for coming. I know we didn't give you much of a chance to speak, but thank you. It must be very interesting for you to see the different parts of the high school that you aren't necessarily part of each day, right? To see your students, how your art students are in math, and how your language students are in the other fields. So thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, we're going to move on. You want to dismiss them or stay for
Absolutely.
public comment?
Given the
Yeah.
length of the agenda, I think comments from the public.
Yeah,
at
yeah.
this
No,
point-
I'm gonna tell you one other thing. Peter just offered we're gonna push the discussion on the district goals to the next meeting, if that's all right with everybody. And we're gonna move right to public comment. So if you wanna stay for a few minutes through public comment in case we have any.
You could ask for comments on the discussion first, and then.
Yes,
any
so
other
yeah, that's probably good. Could we do that? So if anybody has any comments on the discussion that we just had about the high school, we'll do that first, and then we'll move to other questions. Tim? Is it on? I do not. I think it's the bottom. No. Oh, I think I just heard it. Thank you, Jerry.
Tim Madden, Sequoia. I have a few questions, and I agree with Trustee Labate 100%. It's actually the ways that maybe it would be more useful to look at the percentage of students who are not engaged in something. I know when we did the equity study last year, you had 32% of parents reporting that their children did not feel a sense of belonging. It's a pretty high number, so I think it would be important to look at that. And also, just we mentioned robotics, but other club participation.
Sure.
When we're discussing the anxiety and stressor issue, I think it's good that you're helping students with coping strategies, but I think there are some things that the school can do as well to make it a less stressful experience. Just in terms of how it's organized and structured, a lot of schools have testing days, so that you have 5 days in the week, and 1 day is math tests, and another day is English, social studies, foreign language, and science. It's something that's done in the district where I teach, and I think it's very helpful. And also just requiring that teachers give a week's notice before the test is given. And then the last question I had just concerns with regards to the grades, in particular on the scores on the IB and AP exams. Has there ever been a comparison done with course grades and how a student's course grade compares to an IB exam or AP exam grade? And just to make sure that there's some consistency, that students who are scoring 5s on AP exams are scoring high in the class, and students who are scoring 2s.
Yeah.
are-
Yes.
that's-
Yes. We're. Can I answer? Okay.
I'll take it for you.
But,
I'll take it for you. I'll answer it.
But do you know that my answer?
Do I know the answer to it? No. No.
That was
So,
that was one of my
That came up
questions as
at, that actually specific question came up, I think, like either the last meeting or the meeting before. And we're talking about the process for how to study that via the departments. Okay, so that'll be forthcoming.
And am I allowed to, can I ask a question on another issue?
No.
It came up earlier.
let's just get through the high school stuff first and then come back up, okay? I'm sorry, Tim, but just so that we can let them go back home. Does anyone else, although we may not have other questions? Oh, we do.
Denise Ryan, Conrad. Principal Cousins, that was a wonderful report. Thank you. When we're talking about the fact that we have self-selection, and we also talked about specific subjects that maybe students might be having difficulty with, that perhaps because they took a specific math course that wasn't as pre-calculus here as another course. But let's say this child decides on their journey through high school that they indeed then do want to take the calculus course, they want to take a higher level calculus course. Or let's say a child decides in junior year, I think they really want to take that IB physics course, which is an HL, highest level course, and not an SL. So I'm wondering if it's possible, if we still as a district want to keep self-selection, if we could do something that colleges do, and under the physics HL, to be able to describe that it's a higher level course, and what other course material you would need or knowledge you would have had to learn in order to be best successful in that course. And then give the child the opportunity to study on their own, whatever they need to make up for it, and take a little exam. And if they get a particular score, it can at least tell them now you have the ability to succeed. I think that as far as the stress level of a lot of students who choose courses that they're really not prepared for because of prior courses that they took, I think this would help alleviate that. And since we were weak in the IB Math Studies course with the pre-calc class, is that with the pre-calc portion of it?
Yeah, but yes.
That for students who took that course or take that course and then want to go on to a PPAP, maybe there could be a little exam that they need to take and can have the opportunity to study for it so that from day one, that stress level, they're ready to do well. And as far as I know, the answer is going to come in the future as to why there might be some discordance between AP scores and class scores. I think that part of that issue might be parent-driven, because I think that parents want to see their children do well in courses, and we do have some curving done in certain classes, and a lot of this, some of this may come from actually community parents, because we want our kids for their GPAs to look a certain way so that they can get into the best colleges. And in that way, we might be tripping ourselves a little. So I think that although there might be other factors that go into any discordance that we might find, I think we have to take our own responsibility for some. Thank you.
Could I just follow, I just want a point of clarification, just quick. An HL course is just that it's 2 years and it's longer. So the HL course isn't more demanding other than the requirements associated with the course. So the first year of an HL course is very equivalent to It's just the HL really it means the amount of time and the depth to which you go if you go to year 2. So like year 1 of an HL, like biology is HL because it's 2 years and they require 240 hours, so it takes 2 years to do. But the first year of that is equivocal to an AP level. So HL doesn't mean more difficult, it means longer and more kind of assessments and requirements that they have to do if they continue into the second year. And as far as they could, if you work with the department, you could do an assessment for readiness. We do have a pretty good profiling. I mean, the IB course was the first year of it. We have a very good sense of profiles of how students will perform. We can predict with really good accuracy now in 8th grade algebra and then how they will do in geometry, because we've seen so many profiles. We really focus on what are the indicators that will tell us how students will perform. It's also difficult to transition even out of geometry honors. It's very hard to get into algebra and 2 honors if you weren't already in geometry honors. Although we have self-selection, it's very unlikely that you're going to be ready to do that. It's not saying it can't be done, but it's going to be an individual case by case through working with the department to find out what would it take to be ready, how ready am I, and that's why we do teacher input. But it's math in particular, it's very difficult to just all of a sudden change, but it's not that it can't be done. You just have to go and do it and more surgically within the department and to get the individual assessment to check your readiness. But there is a mechanism to do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we can include that. Oh, do you have a high school? Yes, please.
Sorry. Jerry Romano from Seacliff. I'm concerned about the Common Core numbers as you compare to other school districts. We had a pretty well-organized opt-out here. It was orchestrated by the teachers union, right? What numbers
Yeah,
like
the high school, you can't opt out of the high school one. It's required. Every single student has to take all of the Common Core. In high school, there are exams for a student. In the other levels, there are assessments, so you cannot opt out of them. At the high school, there are graduation requirements. So the numbers that you showed, that's where all of our juniors, 100%.
So opt-out only refers to grades 3 through 8.
Yeah.
the trips to Portugal, Belize, who pays for that?
The students pay 100%. The students pay for they pay for the chaperones.
And then I noticed some of the scores on some of these AP tests were not very good. Like they were really, they're dismal. Why would you do it? Or wouldn't you just replace the people who are teaching those classes and coach from another district, like a business would do?
Yeah, no, okay.
So when teachers are tenured, we can't just let them go. There's a process that needs to be followed through the 3028 process to do that. That's not always the reason why scores are low. So what we need to do is look at the reasons for why, and we get a very descriptive item analysis and gap analysis of the test items that kids didn't do well on, and then we look to shift instruction. So as Albert talked about in his presentation, where there have been deficiencies in the past on certain exams, we've targeted those, and that has shown improvement. We agree with you that some of those, and Albert was very upfront about the deficiencies in some of the scores, particularly in mathematics. That's an area of focus for us, and we are really digging very deeply into understand why and what curriculum adjustments need to be made so we don't see those kinds of scores moving forward at all the different levels.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So if we have no more high school questions,
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to move on to the rest of the public portion. So if anybody else has questions,
Other questions?
excuse me?
I think Tim had questions. that
Yeah.
were
No, I
relevant.
said let's move on to the next, any other public comments?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, happy holidays. Thank you.
It's interesting to look at the test.
Good night. Thanks for coming.
My other question was concerning the Bach Harrison survey. Is that to collect like data in the aggregate, or is it for each individual student and to individually or just to get kind of the big picture of the school? How does that work?
So it gets reported. It gets reported in the aggregate, right? So student takes the assessment. It's on frequency of use of substances, tobacco, alcohol, and other illegal drugs. And then we use that, and then it gets broken into different categories, but it's taken anonymously, and then we get the school, we get that info. We don't get it at the individual level, we get it at the aggregate level. So X number of 8th graders have done X in a given time period. Okay, and then we tease out some of the reasons for why. Sure.
Thanks, Tim.
Good
Anything
question.
else?
Thank you for asking it.
Sure.
It's just a request that since LAC is a committee whose members are appointed by the board and serve the board, it would be appreciative if perhaps we could have LAC updates at the board event meetings.
They're scheduled.
They're scheduled. We planned it. It's just not every meeting. Okay, thank
Do
you.
you want to know when the next one is?
Do you have it?
January 11th.
Oh, the next update, Denise, the next update is January 11th. Next board meeting with the LAC update.
Hi, Jerry Romano, CEO again. You've heard me say this before, that how much more expensive North Shore schools are compared to higher performing districts like Harris and Cohasset. It was 35% more. I'm curious, do you have the data that shows why you're spending that money, like in each classroom, each student, and performance?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay. You have a history class. You got 10 students sitting in there. What's the cost to have them in that room? You got 10 across the hall
Oh,
in
I
math
see.
class. What's the cost to have the 10 sitting in that room?
Right. I haven't seen that analysis that exists in the district, and it's not typically how we analyze per pupil cost.
How do you analyze it?
We build an academic program, staff it, and then there are costs associated with those recommendations.
Is it based on performance, class size? Like, how do you determine, like, do I have 9 kids in the class? Do I have 22? When do I combine them? When do I?
Well, that's a really good question, right? So that's exactly why it's. I'm not sure if you were here for the beginning part of what I talked about. It's really, as I build the budget for next year, real actual numbers of who wants what class are really important because that's how I can staff the program more precisely. So I asked the board to give me a little bit more time to present my budget to them so I can base my staffing and enrollment based on real student requests. If I give it, you see what I mean? So if I give my budget to the board in early January, kids are just starting to put their course selections in. So it's not rooted in any kind of precision. It's predictive, and I would rather it be real.
Because I don't know your inner workings, that information's not available. I don't know why it's not available. Like, the information on how you run the school district is not on the district website. A lot of information's not there.
Right.
I'm not sure why. I'd love to see the checkbook. I think we all like to see the checkbook on the district website. I'd love to see, what we're spending in each of these areas. Because it's really skewed. Something's wrong. Something's seriously wrong. I mean, you may not believe that.
I'm not saying I believe it or I don't believe it. I'm saying that as I go through and build the 2018-19 budget, I am looking at every single budget line in the district, every supply, every request, every workbook, every staffing request. That is all being scrutinized as we speak. And then I can answer your question with more specificity. I didn't build the 17-18 budget, Mr. Romano.
I'm guessing that hasn't been done in the past.
I can't answer to that. I wasn't here.
I'll tell you how it works in business, and all of us, how we spend our money every day, even you. If I didn't do it, what would happen? If I didn't spend that money in business, or if I didn't spend that money in my house, or if I didn't spend that money on buying a new car, what would happen? Would I still get there?
Right.
with decisions.
Right.
Right now, we're spending a lot of money, a lot of money. And from the test scores, which I just saw up here, we're not getting there. Those are not great numbers when you compare them to the other districts. They should be phenomenal. They should be off the charts with what we're spending. So there's no correlation in effect. Spending a lot of money, getting great results? No, we're getting good results. It would be it's almost like you're going to buy premium gasoline for $3 a gallon, and you had to pay $4, and what they were giving you was mid-grade. That's what the North Shore schools are. You may not want to believe that, but that's my picture of it, and that's a lot of people in this community's picture of it.
Well, I hope to, over the course of time, earn your confidence.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Oh. Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to our personnel, action item C. Could I have a motion and a second?
Second.
And I have a second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Action item D, approval of budget transfer. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second? And I have a second. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Action item E, approval to dispose of inventory. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Any comments, questions? All in favor? Action item F, approval of memorandum of understanding with the Bach Harrison LLC, which we spoke about earlier. Could I have a
Motion.
motion? I have a motion and a second.
Second.
Okay. Any questions? Any additional questions? All in favor? Action item G, award of bid to Milcon Construction for North Shore High School exterior abatement and reconstruction. Could I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
It says under budget, by the way.
It's under budget.
Yes.
That's good to hear.
Significantly.
Yes.
All in favor? Okay. Action item H, approval of agreement with the Manhattan Theater Club. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second? Comments, questions? All in favor? Action item I, approval of resolution approving a memorandum of agreement. Could I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
All in, any questions? Although it's confidential. Any questions? All in favor? Action item J, appointment of chairpersons to the Committee on Special Education, the CSEs. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions, comments? All in favor? Action item K, approval of special education services contract. Could I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
Questions? All in favor? Action item L, approval of amendment to agreement with All About Kids. Could I have a motion? Yes?
That has to be tabled.
Oh, it does.
We never got the signed, that was a draft that I sent with the revised.
Okay.
It wasn't signed, it never came through today.
Okay. L?
I moved to table.
Okay, and I have a second on the tabling?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor of tabling? Okay, unanimous, thank you. Action item M, approval of special education services, the
Motion.
IEP. Could I have a motion and a second? Any comments, questions? All in favor? Action item N, approval of settlement and release agreement. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second, I have. Any questions? All in favor? Action item O, approval of agreement with Eric Morales. Could I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any comments, questions? All in favor? Action item P, reappointment of audit committee members. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion.
And there was a lot of motion.
All like to move.
There's a lot of motion there. So I have first, second, third, and fourths. All in favor? Thank you. And thank
Could
you
you
to-
ask all in enthusiastic favor? or
I
something?
know,
Could
all
we
in enthusiastic
distinguish
favor.
them
Okay, comments from the public again. All right. Let's move on to old business. Anybody? Okay. Anybody move on to new business? I have new business.
I was going to say, I spoke for an hour in the audit committee. I got
Yes,
it.
but mine is very easy. Rich, you have one as well?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so mine has to do with the Legislative Action Committee. We met on, when did we meet? Tuesday, I'm sorry, Tuesday. I put my question in my phone, so. So we spoke about the legislative night, which is going to be January 18th. Herman has graciously agreed to be our moderator again. So the Legislative Action Committee members have asked the board members if you would please, if you could do it before the holiday break, it would be great. Email questions to them that you would like them to present to the legislators. They're going to take all the questions and then boil them down and get some good questions out of it. So they would really love for us to present them with some questions.
And thank you, Herman.
Yes, and thank you, Herman.
Broad questions, meaning water is a question or education focused
I think
questions?
they want meaty questions. That's what,
Not runny questions.
right, meaty questions. And then actually, Herman, they wanted to know if you wanted the questions, how far ahead of time you wanted the questions. I said a couple of days was okay. Okay, that's what I said. I thought that would be fine, seeing as you've done this many times. So, that's about all I have.
So I'm sorry, I had
Oh,
just one
Dave
quick.
has a question.
I noticed Tom Swazi was not on the flyer.
He wasn't?
I don't think so. Is he
Did we
coming?
take him off? Shelley,
Well, I
did
don't
we
know,
take
it
Tom
said
Swazi
stay
off?
local.
Oh, he said he can't be there. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, Rich.
Yeah, I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Last meeting during public comment, a question was asked about the parent portal at the high school and, feedback in terms of timely feedback. Have we done anything? Are we moving forward on this?
Absolutely, yes. Albert and Rob Dennis have been working with their faculties to give direction, feedback, and develop a common plan for getting assessments back in a more timely way. And then with regard to the portal, we've reached out to a lot of our neighboring school districts to find out what it is that they do, and we're just working through the final tweaks of a recommendation to make that window much shorter. Great, we'll let you know. Hopefully we'll have an answer at the next meeting for you.
Motion to adjourn?
Sorry. I have a work emergency. Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Okay. Sorry, I just got a work emergency. Ed.